Welcome to the Superheroes Everyday podcast. I'm Danny Horn. Thank you for joining us. Superheroes Everyday is a comedy blog about the history of superhero movies, starting with Superman the movie in 1978 and telling the story of how superhero blockbusters became the world's most efficient way to painlessly separate money from the public and then give it to entirely the wrong people. On the blog, I'm writing about the movies in release order, but here on the podcast, we'll be covering pivotal moments in superhero movie history. Today, we are discussing Bryan Singer's uncanny giant-sized mutant masterpiece, Marvel's X-Men. Now, the world is full of stupid podcasts, and I know that my stupid podcast is just a fraction of your stupid media diet, so I'm using the Sid Field 3-act structure to break up the episode. This is Act 1 of X-Men, and then I'll be releasing Act 2 and Act 3 later on in the week. And so now I want to introduce my guest, back by popular demand. It's Trevor Bolliger. Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Danny. Thanks for having me back. Third time's the charm.
I know. It's amazing to see you. You were here talking about X-Men First Class.
Yes, I was.
And then you joined me to talk about Marvel's Eternals. And now you're here for Marvel's X-Men.
I'm here for it. So I think my fate could have been worse. I just listened to your Ghost Rider pod, and I remember watching that when I worked back at Blockbuster Video. And yeah,
it's good, right?
Other than Evil Mendez, it's about as terrible as I remember it.
But you love X-Men. X-Men is your jam. This is the movie that got you into superhero movies. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't want to. This movie's not precious to me, but it's important and it's formative to me. Like, I know exactly the people I saw this movie with. I know exactly the theater that we saw it at. So this came out in 2000. I was when in 2000 was this a autumn or spring?
July 2000.
July 2000. So I'm from a small town in Missouri called Gladstone, Missouri. And it was Gladfest, which just think about like all the corny stuff from Stranger Things, basically that, but in, the year 2000.
Yeah.
And I was at that with my friends, and, I was in like sixth grade at the time. And my friends invited me to go see X-Men, and we went to Arby's and we got like way too many roast beef sandwiches. And then we went to like the Dollar Theater to go see X-Men.
And it was July, so you were off of school. You had school, right, in Missouri?
We did. Different. It wasn't like upstate New York where they teach you fun skills like walking through walls and how to run away effectively, but it's still pretty good.
Well, there is a very complex backstory for this movie that I want to address briefly. It goes all the way back to 1984. Marvel was trying to shop this around to several different studios, and in the early 90s, there was an animated X-Men series on Fox Kids, and that was a big success, and that made 20th Century Fox interested in a live-action film. They wanted Bryan Singer, brought him on as the director. He directed The Usual Suspects in 1995, and then started working on this. It went through at least 6 different writers between 1994 and 1997, and finally, Bryan Singer and producer Tom DeSanto wrote a treatment in 1998 that the studio finally liked. But it still went through several more cycles. They had to take some things out because of the budget. They'd originally planned to include Beast and Nightcrawler and the Danger Room. And the studio said, those all sound very expensive and we don't need those things. It was a very troubled production because Bryan Singer was erratic and moody and on drugs, apparently. And a lot of his attention was given to his sexual abuse of minors, which, as you can imagine, can take up a lot of your time.
I was wondering when we were going to get into the Bryan Singer of it all, and it turns out
we're just doing it.
Minute 0. Yeah, let's get it over with.
We are. You can't avoid it. He liked young guys. Too young, some might say. And there were accusations that some of the young men who you see in the film were given roles in the film in exchange for sex. There are terrible things that he did. Yeah,
when your Wikipedia article is just half controversies, then you've lived a interesting and troubled life.
Yeah, no. But the movie made money. And in Hollywood, that's all that matters. You get more movies after that. Mm-hmm. So running numbers, this was the first major superhero movie since Batman and Robin in 1997. And people were kind of down on superhero movies because of sort of both Superman and Batman ended up with a fourth movie that was very disappointing. This film, number 8 for the year, made $157 million. Not quite as much as the early 90s Batman films, but a lot better than Batman and Robin, a lot better than Blade. And it got excellent reviews. It has 82% on Rotten Tomatoes And then the sequel in 2003 did even better. So this is generally considered like the jumpstart of the new wave of superhero movies. There's X-Men in 2000 and then Spider-Man in 2002. And from then on, superhero movies just were a thing that could happen.
I think the other big change was that for whatever reason, this movie is much more grounded than the
Hmm.
Batman movies. It's a movie that lives in two worlds. One of them is a very like cartoony comic book world, but
Hmm.
then it's also a movie that opens in a concentration camp and is like got these stage actors giving these very serious monologues.
Yes.
And so it's both grounded, but also it, has some fun and it like doesn't take itself too seriously,
Yeah.
which I think is why it has that 82%, is that it does both of them very effectively.
Yeah, Singer really was, I think, committed to the idea that there were serious themes in the movie that he wanted to take seriously. So these ideas about alienation, these ideas about discrimination, those were supposed to play as real.
Hmm.
And we will see how that we'll see how that goes. Get into Act One. Act One begins with Charles Xavier bragging about how important mutation is. He says that normally the process is slow and takes thousands and thousands of years, he says, but every few hundred millennia, evolution leaps forward, which I am not sure is actually the case.
So you mentioned that there were several writers on this. Not a single one of them was a scientist or even understood biology, right?
No, I guess not. I do know that there isn't a lot of evidence in the fossil record of like dinosaurs that could read people's minds or set things on fire. But you never know. It could have happened. There's a lot of mysteries in science.
Hmm.
So the film opens in your favorite film location, concentration camp, as usual.
We've done two movies on this pod, or we've done three movies, and two of them open in
Two out of
concentration
three.
camps. Yep.
Yep. It is Poland, 1944. It is raining and miserable. It's never a great day at Auschwitz, but today is particularly crappy, I think.
Hmm.
Just like in X-Men First Class. And here's little Eric Lencher being separated from his mom. He is screaming. He's trying to reach her, and the guards are dragging him away. But it turns out he has magic powers, and he bends that metal gate with his mind. It doesn't get him anywhere, but he's given it the college try.
Yeah, he gets knocked out, but yeah, it's a visceral scene to open the movie, and it grabs you as an audience. But still, yeah, I don't think Singer needed to go full concentration camp, but here we are.
I mean, it's funny talking about this now because we watched X-Men First Class, which obviously is was made much later, but we just saw it a couple months ago. And watching this, it feels like, oh, they copying off of First Class. It makes a lot more sense in X-Men First Class because that concentration camp experience is like a very clear through line for him through the whole movie and the villain as well. The whole ending kind of ends up there.
They actually did a great job at taking what works in this movie and
Mm-hmm.
finding the right actors in First Class and connecting the right plot points. And so, like, they did a good job at that one. But
Yeah. But here, it basically, rather than being kind of like a through line here, it's just kind of like Eric's all-purpose excuse for being a dick. You ready to ruin some lives?
I'm ready. I'm ready to ruin some lives.
This is what the X-Men do best. We go to Meridian, Mississippi, where teen witch Marie Rogue making time in her bedroom with her cutie pie boyfriend. I'm assuming her last name is Rogue because otherwise I have no idea where the name Rogue comes from, why she calls herself that.
Rogue is, it's very moody, it's very emo, and so yeah, I guess perfectly of the times for the year 2000.
Yeah. They're talking. It all looks very delicious, very hormonal. They're getting into it. And when they kiss, his skin starts to turn black, and she is clearly sucking the life out of him. I don't know if that's what kissing girls is like. I don't have a lot of experience with kissing girls. For all I know, that's how it works.
No, not quite. But when I was a teenager, I thought the worst possible outcome of fooling around was going to be getting pregnant. But I
No, this
I
is
think
worse. Yeah.
this is much worse.
Yeah. Because I don't know if he recovers. He collapses and he just kind of like lies there quivering and she screams. Her parents come in. This is not the dating experience that they were hoping for.
Yeah, Hollywood has a long troubled history of portraying women's sexual desires, and I really don't think this movie contributes well to that discourse.
Yeah, no, yes, you're exactly right. Yep. No, this is just yet another like young woman, very first hardly even sexual experience. Very first time she gets her
Yeah.
lips on anybody. Yeah, no, it's a horrible nightmare for her. Now, using Rogue as a main character in this movie, I think is a really weird choice
Hmm.
because, like, Bryan Singer did say he wanted to feature her because he said that her powers are the most symbolic of alienation, which I guess is true, but she's kind of a drag.
Yeah, I mean, her power is that she sucks. She sucks power out of people and she sucks energy out of the movie.
Yeah, the power of sucking life out of somebody. It turns out not to be that useful. We see her using her powers 4 times in the movie. Twice with Wolverine, once with her
Hmm.
boyfriend, and once with Magneto. And every single time it's a trauma.
Yeah.
2 of them are just saving her own life. Once she's putting David in a coma for no reason. And with Magneto, he's basically assaulting her.
Hmm.
Why do we need these powers in this movie?
Was she in the cartoon series of the 90s? I don't really remember it. Was she like a fan favorite or was just a
She is, yeah. She was in the comics a lot, and she's in the cartoons and stuff a lot. I have never really connected with her as a character. I'm not sure why she's so popular, but definitely not here in this movie.
I don't think it ruins the movie, but it's certainly this like odd,
It's a weird,
awkward.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., where Jean Grey is giving a presentation, I guess, to Congress. I don't know if they have like a lecture series, but that appears to be what they're doing. She's given a presentation on the beginning of another stage of human evolution. This would be, I think, of all the stages of human evolution, this would be the goofy one, where like random people at puberty, they suddenly manifest like tragic and dangerous magic powers.
And yeah, she does say that it starts at puberty, and it's yeah, when you become a teenager, you start to get a little freaky.
Yeah, they are. She says like the powers are often triggered by periods of heightened emotional stress. And mostly what they do is cause heightened emotional stress for everybody else. So it should be kind of like a domino effect, I would think.
Yeah.
There is Senator Kelly, Senator Robert Kelly, loudmouth demagogue secret Nazi, who uses the Q&A period to just grandstand on the mutant issue.
Hmm. Hmm.
He says that the focus of this whole hearing is 3 words. Are mutants dangerous? Trevor, are mutants dangerous?
I mean, the answer is yes, but
Obviously, yes. They're incredibly dangerous. Like, mostly they're dangerous to themselves and each other. But yeah.
at risk of giving Bryan Singer too much credit, there's always going to be a moral panic that politicians will use as a wedge issue. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're watching this movie 23 years after it came out, and it's just as effective now as it was back then.
Yeah. It feels like this could be happening absolutely today.
Yep. Hmm.
That being said, I have some sympathy. I don't feel like we see a helpful mutant in this entire movie. I'm gonna give an example. Cyclops. He's a walking nuclear bomb. He destroys a train station by looking at it.
Uh-huh.
We do not see a mutant that can heal the sick. We do not see a mutant that can feed the hungry. We don't even see somebody like giving a little kid a boost and helping him to pick something up off a high shelf.
Nobody helping an elderly lady cross the street. No, nothing.
Nothing. Nope. Probably like this is a comic book, and superhero comics are all about fighting. And so the mutants who end up on a team, they're all going to have like fighting powers. And Kelly says like there are mutants who are hiding who have the power to enter our minds and control our thoughts. And what do you know? There is currently a mutant in the upper gallery right now who can enter their minds and control their thoughts. He is correct. So I don't know. He wants to pass a mutant registration act. He wants to put numbers on everybody, which is not really, I think, going to help the situation that much. Like you can tattoo a number on a guy who turns dogs inside out, but at the end of the day, you're either going to need to talk to the guy or you talk to the dogs. Like the number's not going to fix anything. So Charles Xavier, aka Professor X, he's there in the audience. He sees an old friend leaving the gallery, who we know from a future movie, follows him out into the hall. They have a conversation. These are the 2 leaders of the underground mutant community. Professor X, he's got a school for mutant runaways, and Eric is the little boy from the concentration camp. And he runs a little band of lunatics called the Brotherhood of Mutants, who are planning to take over the world by, like, I don't know, jumping really high and moving forks around. Now, Charles and Eric they're basically supposed to be Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But Xavier is like a version of Martin Luther King who doesn't lead marches or give speeches or do any kind of public activism. He mostly just like sits around and kind of hopes.
Hmm.
So not a particularly effective way to shape public opinion.
I think one of the smartest moves that the producers did was getting these two veteran, very talented stage actors for these roles. I think
Yes.
if they had gotten anybody cheaper than this movie, Ian McKellen is Gandalf. Like
Yeah.
he's on his rise to becoming like a super nerd star at this point. And
And Patrick Stewart is just coming off of that.
just coming off of Star Trek, and so
Yeah.
and they're great. They're great actors. Like they say some absolutely ridiculous nonsense in this movie. But yeah, I think without them kind of believing that ridiculous nonsense, this movie would have,
Yeah, you get these like two very accomplished British actors to come and have a scene with each other at the top of this extremely silly movie. And yeah, no, they kind of elevate it to another level. Next, I have a question for you. We are in northern Alberta,
hmm
where teen runaway Marie from Mississippi has decided to start her new life. My question for you, why does she go to Canada?
I watched this movie closely, trying to figure it out, seeing if she was going to say like, "Oh, I've been looking for you, Logan," but she's just
No.
by happenstance is in
She got
Canada.
into a truck and told a man, I want to go to Laughlin City. And he lets her out and he's like, here you are, Laughlin City. And I'm not sure what she was expecting.
One thing that I really do appreciate about this movie is that it moves at a very steady clip. It moves quickly and swiftly. It does not have too much like excess on it. It just
Mm-hmm.
goes. And one of the good things about that is that it doesn't really allow you too much time when you're just watching it, you know.
Absolutely. To think about like, hey, why is this person over here? Yeah, you and I have seen this multiple times at this point, and we've thought
Yeah.
very deeply about it and taken notes on it. We see all the things that are silly about it, but yeah, totally agree.
It's yeah, if you take 2 seconds and you think about why is she in Alaska versus like somewhere else that might be a little bit more safe. And she like hides under tarps and she like hides in the corner. She's
Well, and she goes to a bar. She goes to a very rowdy lumberjack bar. Yeah,
that has
it's
cage fights.
yeah, so she has like weird survival skills, but she's incredible at networking. That is a huge skill for her. I very much envy her on that. Because this is a big, mean, scary truck stop full of, I guess, angry lumberjacks. Like there's a lot of very bloodthirsty men in plaid who are crowded around a cage watching dudes get beat up. It is theme night at the bar tonight, and the theme is come get your ass kicked by Wolverine.
A lot of people are into that. I mean, if there was a bar and I could
Apparently.
get my ass kicked by Hugh Jackman, I'd consider going. Yeah.
That you know what? You and I agree
I'd
on
leave
that.
with a black eye and a story to tell. What's better than that?
Well, there is an extremely muscular man with his shirt off posing in the cage, like the world's angriest underwear model. And people are just getting in that cage and they are tangling with him. And this is where I just fall apart as a critic. Because Hugh Jackman is beautiful and Wolverine is such a fun character. I'm a little worried that all I'm gonna do during this movie is just like keep saying I love Wolverine, which might get kind of boring. But I feel like everyone who watches this movie walks out and they're just like, oh, I just love
Yeah, I
Wolverine.
guess I just a few minutes ago said that the best thing this movie did was get these two veteran British actors, but
Yeah, that's not the best thing at all.
no, no, Hugh Jackman is the best thing.
Yeah, he's amazing. And he was not first choice, by the way. It took them a
Oh,
minute.
really?
First choice was Russell Crowe, who in 2000, this was not Russell Crowe today. Russell Crowe of 2000, who was in Gladiator, which, if you think about that movie, kind of
Yeah.
it makes more sense. Okay, yeah, he could do this. He turned it down. He actually recommended Hugh Jack. They're both Australian, and I guess they were friends. And he actually recommended Hugh Jackman for it, but they didn't cast him at first. They cast Doug Ray Jones from Mission
Never heard of
Impossible
him.
2. No, I don't know.
Hmm.
All I know is he was in Mission Impossible 2 as the villain, and he got hurt during filming of Mission Impossible 2, and that's why he couldn't be an X-Men.
I mean, that's just the risk of starring against Tom Cruise.
Tom
But
Cruise, I know you're going to get injured.
no, that guy, yeah, I remember Mission Impossible 2. Ridiculous movie, but the villain was
Yeah,
great. Like I
yeah,
remember the villain all these years later.
that guy was going to be Wolverine, but he got hurt, and so they ended up casting Hugh Jackman. They cast him 3 weeks into filming, and so imagine that. And he just walked in and he crushed it.
And he like steals not just the movie, but the franchise. Like of all of these
Yeah,
actors and all these
yeah.
characters, he is the only one that like still in the year 2023 can get people excited to go see an X-Men movie.
Yeah, or a Deadpool movie, which is what he's doing
Yeah.
next.
Yep.
One thing that is great about Wolverine, and this is kind of how they introduce him, is he is incredibly violent and strong. And his job is to just to be tougher than anybody else. And so to make that appealing, you make sure that the people that he's beating up are just assholes. So it feels fully satisfying when that happens. And so they get a guy who's entering the cage who specifically wants to punch him in the balls. And we see him like smack Wolverine in the face a couple times and then kick him in the gut a couple times. And all the evil Canadians are like screaming their approval, like douchebags. And then Wolverine gets up, and he just like stops a punch with his fist. And the guy is just like damaged instantly. And then he does like one punch and kind of a headbutt, and the guy goes down. And there is Wolverine, huge and pink and tough and sexy. And he just kind of like shakes it off. And everyone's booing at him, and he doesn't care. Everybody's booing at him. It is a tremendous introduction.
The Holocaust, a Senate hearing, a cage fight. This is a movie for children.
It's a good 1, 2, 3 punch. And there's Rogue there. And there's Rogue in the bar.
Somebody who just hit puberty in this bar.
Yeah. Just the most, and this seems like kind of a dangerous bar to be in. People are getting beat up right in front of her. Here is a fairly vulnerable young woman just sitting there. Everyone else goes home. She just sits in the bar, absolutely not sure what she's trying to achieve here. If she is she specifically trying to like hitch a ride with Wolverine? Impossible to say.
I don't think so. I think my hypothesis is that she's just trying to get far away from people, that she's traumatized by hurting this cute boy that she liked.
Yeah.
And she realizes that she's got this terrible power that she can hurt people when she skin to skin contact. So one, go somewhere where it's cold, so she's always bundled up with gloves.
Mm-hmm.
That's smart.
Check.
And then two, go to a very rural and remote place where there's not many people. Now, I don't think she's got the survival skills to like forage off the land. She's not that kind of mutant. So I don't know what her like step 2 is.
She's the kind of mutant who sits at a bar and drinks water. And knows, I don't know. It's very weird. Wolverine comes in. He sits down. He's wearing clothes now. I like him anyway. He has a cigar and he orders a beer and he's very grumpy. And he has the hilarious Wolverine hairstyle that should not work, except that it kind of does.
I mean, he looks quite literally like a Wolverine, like a wild animal. He's got mutton chops, but no mustache and beard, and then like crazy side. Like, yeah, it shouldn't work.
I have a hairstyle story.
Go for it.
In the comics, Wolverine was actually introduced with a mask on, and he didn't take the mask off for the first year. So on the mask, he has these kind of like feral werewolf style ears on the costume. And so when he took the mask off finally, to make him still recognizable as that character, they styled his hair up like that, which is kind of a funny look, but it's unique and it's really memorable and it really stuck. And originally on this movie, when they started shooting with him, his hair wasn't so stylized. And Avi Arad, who was the head of Marvel Studios, he just didn't think that he looked like Wolverine enough. And so he called in Kevin Feige. This is one of Kevin's moments.
Wow, we're dropping the F-bomb.
Yeah, he was the associate producer of the film, and they felt like the hair wasn't working, and it was Kevin's idea that if they really pushed the hairstyle to look like the comics, then it would look more like Wolverine. And the hairstylist was saying that it would look goofy, which it does, but they kept bothering the hairstylist, like make it bigger, until they finally said like, okay, fine. It just made it look ridiculous. And they were like, yes, that's what we're using. And I love it.
That's a fantastic story.
There you go.
And now we kind of have a glimpse into why Kevin Feige is so like successful, because like when he has a vision, he cannot rest until he gets that vision.
He knows no matter how silly it is. And I think it works for his character just because his entire persona is kind of like hunted and self-conscious. Like he's just like kind of scowling at the world, and his whole attitude is like, you got a problem with me? So giving him this kind of extreme looking hairstyle, it's sort of this visual way of like, you've got the hairstyle and then he's sort of scowling under it, like, I dare you.
Yeah.
I dare you to comment on this.
Yeah. He looks kind of feral, but also kind of like a greaser a little bit.
Yeah.
It's iconic at this point. But
Yep. I love the man. Television at the bar has shown a news report about an upcoming UN World Summit where the leaders of the world will be discussing the mutant phenomenon and its impact on our world stage, which is a very funny storyline that I wish they'd played with some more.
I'm appreciating the fact that this like redneck bar in the middle of Canada is showing just, geopolitical news.
Yeah, they got CNN on. So we don't see the president of France talking about how they deal with French mutants. I would really like to see that. I would like to see the
Mm,
world leaders. We unfortunately only see them from a great distance.
man, imagine an alternate version of this movie where Magneto's plan actually works, and so we actually get to see all of the world leaders.
Would love that. I would love that. That's the missed opportunity right there.
Okay.
Turning into lizards and like suddenly they can see people's dreams. That would be amazing.
We can only hope with this multiverse madness that's going on right now that maybe
Yeah.
Disney will come
Will
in.
finally come through on the mutant world leaders. But
Mm.
these guys have a mutant problem. They got it sitting right here at the bar. The guy that Wolverine beat up in the cage comes by, and I don't know why he thinks after the experience that he's had that Wolverine is a person you should mess with, but he just decides to come and do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the smartest person in the room.
He comes at Wolverine with a knife. This is round two as far as he's concerned. And Rogue screams, "Look out!" which is not entirely necessary because Wolverine is a terrifying mutant animal who can spring like razor sharp metal claws out of his knuckles. And he like pins the guy up against a pillar, and he's fantastic. And the bartender has a rifle which he pulls out and he says, like, "Get out of my bar, freak." And Wolverine just like turns and like slashes the gun in half with his awesome claws. He's just so much fun.
It's excellent. It's truly excellent.
This is another one of them moments where I'm like, I don't have a joke. I just love Wolverine.
Yeah.
I just love everything he does. They tell him to get out. He gets out. He goes to his trailer. He's got like a little trailer hitch carrying his motorcycle. He drives away. And at some point, the next morning, I suppose, he realizes that there's somebody scrambling around inside his trailer. So he parks, he goes and he looks, and there's Rogue hiding inside.
You know, part of me wishes that she would have just been left at the bar. Like, if her role was only to just introduce the audience to Logan, that would have been great. But
Oh, right. We just leave her behind. That
yeah.
was it. That's the last we see of Rogue. She's currently pursuing her career as a missing person. And so he is going to leave her on the side of the road, which is what he should do. But he feels sorry for her. He comes back, and this sequence is super important because Wolverine, he's so gruff and he's scary. And when you get him to smile a little bit, it turns him into this complete like three-dimensional character. Now, there are three steps to making the audience like a character. There's make a friend, make a joke, make something happen. And Wolverine manages all three in this sequence to an amazing degree.
He does all three throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah, it's all he does.
Yeah.
All of those things, all the time. Making a friend is like a super important part of constructing a likable character because the audience needs a cue that says this is a worthwhile person to invest your energy in. So if somebody in the story likes them, that means that they have value. And so this is the scene where he makes friends with Rogue. And I don't even like Rogue, but it makes him more appealing because I want him to be friends with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that he can do that. And then making a joke is also crucial because it indicates to the audience that the character is aware that their job is to entertain us. And that is why we're looking at them right now. So Wolverine has a number of like snappy little comebacks in this sequence, and that makes him appealing. Rogue does not. She makes him smile a little bit, but she doesn't actually say anything funny. And that is why I think for you and me especially, this does not make her likable.
No, she just criticizes him. She just criticizes his trailer and like,
Yeah. She's like a sad sack.
yeah.
The third step is to having a likable character is to make something happen that moves the plot along because the audience likes characters who can keep things interesting. And Wolverine is basically like a walking, snarling plot point. Like he's like a coiled spring that's just waiting for any excuse to explode. And so he's being snarly about not wearing a seatbelt. And then all of a sudden a tree crashes down in front of the trailer and he hits it and he goes flying through the windshield to his painful death.
And it is very funny. It's like the rag doll that they threw out of a cannon is just like
Yeah,
you're gonna laugh because it looks pretty cheesy, but then
but he's all broken.
yeah, poor guy.
But you can't kill Wolverine with something stupid like a spinal injury. Wolverine is not a thing that you can stop.
Nope, nope.
He gets up, and that is when we learn that he can magically heal himself from anything. And he just kind of like shakes it off. And I like the way he sort of like kind of magically cracks his spine back into place as he's like walking back to the car. Now, Rogue is just sitting there motionless in the car. I don't really get how she acts. Her legs are, I guess she's in shock, but she doesn't do a goddamn thing. And I find that, I resent that actually. I feel like if you're going to be a character in a movie and the camera is on you, it is your responsibility to come up with something to contribute.
No, no, she refuses to contribute down to the last minutes of the movie.
That is true. And so Wolverine's coming back. He smells something. And this is the first time that we see he has all the woodland animal powers,
Yeah.
which is just adorable. And his claws come out. And then suddenly this huge, hairy, crazy looking man monster named Sabretooth kind of bursts out of the undergrowth. And now this is a fight between two crazy animal men. Tell me about Sabretooth.
I didn't catch his name when I was watching it, so I just called him the Monster Boy. I mean, for a while I was calling him Beast, but I knew that Beast was a completely
There
different
already is
character.
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, but as we mentioned earlier, there are elements of this movie that are very grounded in the real world, and then there
Mhm.
are very fantastical comic book elements, and he is like right out of the comic books. He's just very silly. He just growls a lot. He refuses to obey the laws of physics. I mean, he's like a perfect henchman in that he's completely disposable. He's kind of scary and intimidating, but like he could just drop out of the movie immediately and it would be the same movie.
Magneto's all about like doing these big monologues. And then Sabretooth kind of stands next to him and is just like huge and hairy and just growling.
Doesn't have a line of dialogue until Professor X takes control.
Yeah, gives him puts some words in his mouth.
Uh-huh.
Wolverine's caught off guard because he's just used to beating up drunk lumberjacks. So Sabretooth kind of grabs him and knocks him unconscious. And meanwhile, Rogue is just trapped in the car that's on fire because she's terrible. And suddenly two more mutants show up and they chase Sabretooth away using snow and laser beams. And they save Rogue and Wolverine before the car blows up, like they don't actually do.
Yeah, I was gonna say this movie was released in 2000, but it follows the car crash rules of the 1980s, where
Yes.
it has to explode in just a giant fireball
Which is how cars that's why you don't see a lot of our old cars on the road.
because they've all exploded.
Because they always explode. That's why everybody has to buy a new car.
Do you think if they saved the budget, the pyrotechnics budget from that, they could have put Beast or Nightcrawler into this movie?
Nightcrawler's expensive.
Yeah.
We'll see that in the next film. Nightcrawler looks expensive every time we see him.
And do you also want Toad and Nightcrawler in the same movie?
I don't want Toad at all, I think, is part of my answer to that question.
Well, I disagree with you, so we'll get to that when we get to him.
All right, then. Very well. Now, I have an important question about the stupid plot of this stupid movie, which is, how did they know about Rogue? We're going to find out Magneto has sent Sabretooth all the way up to Canada, and we think he's hunting Wolverine. Like, Professor X thinks he's hunting Wolverine, but we find out that actually he's come to get Rogue. And my question is, like, how does Magneto know who Rogue is, or what her powers are, or where she is? Like, I can imagine tracking Wolverine because he draws a lot of attention, but Rogue is just like a quiet little sad girl that nobody knows. And she hasn't been using her powers or anything. The only thing that anybody knows is there's a girl in the world whose boyfriend is in a coma and she ran away.
So this is it's a movie that's for a large part set in a high school, so it embodies high school life. So gossip is like a through line to this movie.
You're right. That is the only answer.
If you watch this movie thinking that everybody is just a busybody gossip queen, then you'll just notice that they're always talking about somebody who's in the other room. And so I can only imagine that through the mutant power of gossip, they found out that there is Rogue. And, Magneto, smart guy, is like been looking for somebody who can steal and amplify his power. So,
and he's just heard about that somehow.
yeah.
Then we see the first staff meeting of the Brotherhood of Mutants, which is led by Eric, aka Magneto, and three not very expensive villain mutants. There's Magneto, who has magnetism powers that can basically do anything. Sabretooth, who's the big guy with claws and big black eyes. And there's Toad, who's like a sickly looking runt with a long tongue. And then there's Mystique, the blue shapeshifter, who we don't see actually until the end of Act 1. Magneto is not happy with Sabretooth coming home empty handed. He realizes Charles has figured out they're looking for somebody. And that's why he sent Storm and Cyclops to go and save Wolverine and Rogue. But the UN summit is approaching. They have work to do. What comes up next is the Wolverine body worship scene, which is a personal favorite of mine. Bryan Singer was into dudes, and you can tell how much he likes them because he makes a big spectacle of how hot Hugh Jackman is.
I mean, Danny, I know that there's only two questions that matter when you talk about a superhero movie.
That's right.
And so we know that it made $156-ish million.
Yep.
And do you want to speak to the second question?
And how hot are the people? Yeah. One of the main themes of this podcast is the history of shirtless dudes in superhero blockbusters. And I think this might be the first real deployment of shirtless male torso as a storytelling engine.
He's topless for most of the movie.
A lot. They do the sensible thing when you've got a guy with a body like Hugh Jackman, you lay him out on a hospital bed like a dinner buffet, and you see him from lots of different angles, and then he gets up and he runs out into a really bright hallway where he is impeccably lit. And that is how we deal with something like that. He is very surprised. He finds himself in Star Trek or whatever the hell this is supposed to be, this little like habit trail of shiny science fiction hallways. And he finds a little costume area and he grabs like a hoodie to put on because I guess like enough's enough.
Yeah,
like,
no, he's getting a little bit chilly, and
yeah, we live in an imperfect world. He's bound to put a shirt on at some point.
I mean, all the while, Professor X is playing with him like a cat plays with a mouse, just kind of fucking like sending echoes off in the distance, and like
it is entirely unnecessary. Yeah,
it's like horror movie stuff right there.
They're creating this big dramatic moment for Wolverine. He goes upstairs and it's this huge mansion with all warm colors and glossy hardwood floors, and he has no idea where he is. He's completely freaked out. He has had an eventful life so far, but nothing has prepared him for this. He ducks behind a pillar, and then there's like this onslaught of children pummeling down the stairs. And then he goes through a hidden door. It is not clear why he decides that that's the place to go.
He's afraid of children.
But he ends up surrounded by him. He ends up in Professor X's classroom where he's teaching physics to this little handful of physics kids. And Patrick Stewart looks up and he says, "Good morning, Logan. Physics. I'm Charles Xavier. Would you like some breakfast?" Which might be like the strangest collection of sentences that anyone has ever said to Wolverine.
I'm brave of the movie to admit that physics actually exists, and then for all the fight scenes to just disregard them. But go on. Breakfast?
And then he gets to meet all the X-Men, which is very exciting. We get to see all the characters they could afford. So in comes Storm and Cyclops and Jean Grey, which is a lot of people. Tell me your thoughts on these people.
I like all of them. It's very funny to watch like young Halle Berry before she became famous, because this was like the thing that got her like, this is the thing that sent her on the path to becoming like a superstar for, a decade or so. But she barely has anything to do in this movie. She has a couple of important battles, but
she's very quiet. She's
quiet. She just kind of stands in the corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the reasons that I still hold this movie in high regard is I remember this trio of characters, and I still liked them.
Yeah, they are good. I feel like James Marsden is not used up to his full potential because he's exceptionally handsome, and they lock him down under a set of goggles, and they don't let him smile, and he's always wearing a turtleneck.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see his eyes. It would have been he smirks a couple times. Throughout the movie, him and Logan have a couple of one-upsmanships, and like there's some jabs. They tell some jokes, but he could have almost grounded his own movie, but
but they used it. Yeah, they used up all the boy ogling. They used it up on Wolverine. There's no more left over. Xavier tells Wolverine that this place is his school for the gifted, and he introduces everybody by code name, and Wolverine just thinks this is dumb. and he wants to leave.
Yeah. I mean, this is again Wolverine telling a joke to the audience, like probably that the audience is also wanting to tell.
Right,
It's,
yes.
it's a little bit of a wink, but yeah, it.
Yeah. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Yeah. And Charles keeps Wolverine there by just making false promises to him.
Mhm.
By saying, I know that you have amnesia, you've been wandering around for 15 years, you have no idea who you are, where you come from, because he has psychic powers. And he convinces Wolverine to stick around and try to figure out what the fuck everybody's talking about.
Let's get this cage fighter to hang around all these children.
That's a good idea. We see Rogue sitting in class. Apparently, she just is enrolled now in this crazy school. I don't know what they're trying to teach Rogue. And she's surrounded by boys who are trying to show off to her. The kid in front of her can create fire, and the kid next to her can create ice. And she's like, okay, I just got here, so I don't know how to deal with any of you.
I mean, we know that all of their mutant powers start at puberty, and so by definition, they are all horny. So
That's right. All these hormonal mutants trying to learn how to control their powers. And then they do the Wolverine tour of the school, which is so cute.
I love it. I love it. They're showing them all the highlights. There's kids playing frisbee on the quad. There's the mess
Mm-hmm.
hall, a diverse group of kids studying together. You know, all we need is some guy with an acoustic guitar playing hacky sack, and it's the perfect pamphlet.
With his mind. Yeah. And I love like they're kind of walking around and Xavier is explaining, he's kind of doing all the exposition about how like the school's full of runaways and there are lots of mutants out there who don't like people. And every sentence that he says, the scene changes. So they're in like the big airplane hangar where there's the big Quinjet. And then like a sentence later, they're in the stables. And then they're in like the science fiction hallway. And I want there to be a shot where now like they're walking through a circus and there's all these like mutant clowns who are juggling. And then like next sentence, they're like underwater and they've got snorkeling gear on. Like they could just do that forever as far as I'm concerned. And then we see obnoxious Senator Kelly, terrible senator man who wants to make mutation illegal. He gets into a helicopter and he flies away somewhere. I'm not sure where he's supposed to be flying to, but he doesn't get there wherever it's supposed to be. On the helicopter, he's talking to his little associate about how this is a war against the mutants. And then the guy just suddenly turns into a blue-skinned mutant lady named Mystique, who just
Mhm.
kicks him 100 times until he's knocked out. And it turns out that the helicopter has been overtaken with mutants. And with Wolverine adapting to his new life as a sexy school teacher, and Magneto making his first move against the sinister senator and all of his unfriendly ilk, that is the end of Act 1 of X-Men. I will be releasing Act 2 later this week, and here's what's coming up. That is a good power, actually, is being able to manifest a helicopter whenever you want.
I just appreciate that the movie is still looking out for the very stoned people in the audience.
Does she even do any telekinesis? Does she telekinet anything?
She keeps putting herself in these really dangerous situations, and I don't care enough about her to hope that she doesn't get hurt.
There's no medical staff at this school. This is a school where there are children who are learning how to control their mutant powers. You have to imagine people get injured on the regular.
Or maybe the senator turned into hand sanitizer, so it's one of those kind of problems that resolves itself.
All right, stay tuned for that. Thank you, Trevor.
Hey, thank you. It's been fun.
I will meet you back here for Act 2 of X-Men on the Superheroes Everyday podcast. Thanks for listening.
Physics. I'm Charles Xavier. Would you like some breakfast?